1.
Hello and welcome to the recap of the Korean drama Weak Hero Class 1. This is Yeon Si Eun. His life's goal is to get perfect grades, but at a cost. He's an outsider at school and is extremely physically weak. After Si-eun wins a prestigious award, Young-bin, the class bully, becomes jealous and begins picking on Si-eun, from throwing slippers at him, stealing his books, and finally, humiliating him in front of his class. However, despite all this, Si-eun isn't intimidated but even more annoyed. Seeing this, the bully decides to up the ante by purchasing a fentanyl patch from his cousin, Seok-dae. He plans on using it on Si-eun during the exams to mess him up. The next day, a new transfer student arrives, Seok, a weak, shy, and nerdy kid with rich parents. Being an easy target for the bullies, they coerce him into slapping the fent patch on Si-eun, causing him to fail his exams. Due to his natural genius in studying, he's able to gain an edge in an otherwise physical activity, despite how weak he really is.
물체의 원심력을 이용해 타격 지점에 더 큰 충격을 줄 수 있다.
However, he isn't always able to make up the difference.
선은 넘지 마시고, 응? 적당히 하셔야지.
After taking a breather and calming down, Si-eun swallows his pride and apologizes to the student who stopped him from going further, An Soo-ho. Drawn to Si-eun's loner Sigma energy, the new student, Seok, tries to make up with him but ends up getting brushed off. However, at the school gate, Young-bin hires his cousin to get revenge for him and takes Si-eun off somewhere else. Seeing this, Seok runs off to find help.
뭐하냐?
Surprisingly, Si-eun has everything under control, until...
야, 나와봐.
After all hope seems lost, An Soo-ho arrives. Having been told by Seok that Si-eun was in danger, Soo-ho ran over to help. After some well-coordinated fighting sequences, Seok also decides to step in and save Si-eun. Wanting to save what's left of his pride after losing to a couple high school students, Seok-dae decides to leave them alone. For now. Enjoying a well-deserved barbecue sesh where Soo-ho works part-time, the boys grow closer and truly make up. However, unbeknownst to them, a new challenger was approaching. Seok-dae was summoned by his boss Kil-soo, who is upset that he had lost to some kids. He promises to take revenge and punishes Seok-dae by breaking his wrist. In the next scene, while Si-eun was shopping, he finds a member of Seok-dae's gang shoplifting. After she is almost caught by the store clerks, she pretends to be Si-eun's friend and ends up getting escorted through the rain. The two end up getting a meal as she introduces herself. Her name is Youngie and she's an orphan that lives with Seok-dae. With no income or job, she commits crimes for the infamous gangster Kil-soo in exchange for room and board. As she leaves, she saves her phone number on Si-eun's phone and tells him to keep in touch. The next day at school, Young-bin, the bully who was embarrassed by Si-eun, begs him to meet with his lawyer to stop him from going to juvie for handling drugs. However, it turns out he was actually leading them to Kil-soo's gang. The gangster threatens the trio to cough up $15,000 for breaking Seok-dae's wrist in 3 days or else. The following days, the trio are constantly watched by the gang, making sure they don't try to escape and leave the city. Fearing that his father would find out, Pomsok steals an expensive watch from his father to pay off Kyosu. Before getting the authorities involved, Si Eun calls Youngie and asks if she can give any useful information on the gang. Surprisingly, she agrees and explains that she hates Kyosu and is tired of being used by him. She explains that Kyosu actually runs an illegal gambling site for high schoolers. Kyosu actually rigs the site so that the students win a few $100s to get them interested, but then makes them quickly lose everything after. Crushed by defeat, he swoops in and loans them money to gamble more to make up the loss. Of course, as high schoolers, they aren't able to pay him back, so they give them their parents' belongings as collateral, which Kyosu uses to extort even more money from the parents. To top it all off, Youngie explains where he stores all of his ledgers and receipts. Then, on the third day, Suho decides to go with Kyosu alone to protect his friends and try to distract him while Si Eun gets the cops. However, Pomsok cracks and decides to try and appease Kyosu with the money he had prepared and chases after Suho. Unfortunately, Kyosu sniffs out their plans like a dog and runs away with all the evidence of his crimes, along with the beat-up Suho and Pomsok. In the next scene, an enraged Kyosu yells at Soktae for allowing the kids to trick them and to come to his location. Knowing he's about to be punished, he tries to go alone, but Youngie ends up coming with him. At the same time, she calls Si Eun to track her location and to bring the cops with him. When they finally arrive, Kyosu punishes Soktae for his incompetence, but Youngie, unable to take it anymore, fights back. Then Si Eun finally shows up with the cops. However, it turns out the cop sirens were just on Si Eun's phone and were only a small distraction. Embarrassed and annoyed, Kyosu begins beating up the boys, until... After narrowly making an escape, Kyosu runs away only to be stopped by Si Eun and Suho. Later at the police station, a well-dressed man shows up and allows the boys to get away from any questioning. It turns out that Pomsok's father is actually a National Assemblyman, and the well-dressed man was his secretary. After the police station, Si Eun, Suho, and Youngie have a warm bonding session in the hospital. However, Pomsok is disciplined harshly for being a threat to his father's political career. The next day, while hanging out with everyone, Pomsok begins to become jealous as he feels left out from the rest of the group. Later, at karaoke, Pomsok coincidentally reunites with his old school bullies. Reminded of his trauma and his inferiority complex flaring up, Pomsok lashes out at Suho. Worried about Pomsok's unusual crash out, they visit him at his house. There, they find out that Pomsok was actually adopted by his father to make his public image look good, and that he had been getting harassed by bullies. Shocked and upset, Suho and Si Eun accompany him to get an apology from the bullies. However, after a fake apology, Pomsok isn't able to take it anymore. As Pomsok's inferiority complex flares up, he takes it out on Suho and leaves. Funnily enough, his current school bullies end up taking care of his old schools. As they were getting beat up, Pomsok takes out all of his pent-up stress on them. Feeling like he finally belongs, he joins the bully group and goes off to enjoy himself. In the next scene, Pomsok ends up meeting up with Youngbin and his new classmates at the club. Among them is a YouTuber by the name of Youngwoo, who goes around recording his fights with people for fun. As the days go on, Pomsok becomes better friends with the bullies. Then, one day during lunch, Pomsok and Suho finally confront each other. Pomsok ends up getting thrown like a rag doll, embarrassing himself in front of the school, and decides to get revenge. Later that day, to get revenge, they cut the brakes on Suho's motorcycle. At school, Suho suspects Pomsok for the motorcycle, but doesn't call him out on it. Later, as Youngie and Si Eun are setting up Suho's birthday party, Pomsok asks Youngie to come out. He then uses her as a hostage and calls out Suho, but Si Eun intercepts the messages and goes in his place. Si Eun finds Youngie and tries to escape, but eventually gets backed into a corner and has to fight. Barely fighting off all the bullies, Si Eun is left fighting Youngwoo. losing miserably, the cops finally begin to arrive, with Sheehan left beat and battered on the floor. In the following days, Soo becomes suspicious of how little he's been seeing Sheehan and Pumseok, and ends up overhearing the bullies discussing how much they beat up Sheehan. After beating the information out of them, he decides to finally confront Pumseok. Meanwhile, Pumseok's father finds out what he's actually been doing and decides to ship Pumseok abroad to study and stay low. Unable to take it any longer, Pumseok calls Youngwoo and Suho for a final showdown against each other. As Suho arrives at the boxing gym, he has a quick warm-up against all of the bullies. After making quick work of everyone, he joins Youngwoo in the ring. Just as Suho was wrapping up the fight, one of the bullies trips him and helps Youngwoo land a decisive blow to the head. As the fight concludes, Suho asks Pumseok to stop blaming others and change. However, when the dust finally settled, Suho was no longer breathing. After calling an ambulance and with the help of his father's secretary, Pumseok and his friends created a plausible story and became innocent. Thankfully, Suho had received medical attention in time, however, he was now in a coma. Heartbroken, Shin decides to take revenge in his own hands. After beating Yongbin, Shin finds his next target in Youngwoo. Finally, he faces Pumseok. He asks why Pumseok had to go that far to someone who was once his friend. Ridden with guilt, the only thing Pumseok can say was that he doesn't know. Blaming himself for letting things get to this point, Sheehan isn't able to hit Pumseok at all. After all the violence, Sheehan is expelled and forced to transfer to a new school. Once again, all on his own once more, Sheehan goes back to his studies. However, even at this new school, he's forced to fight again.